Hey.
Hey, I'm so excited to be here with you. It's really fun. It's really fun to be able to hang out with you on the other side of work.
Always, always.
Um, well, I guess hello and welcome to the KFTCC and Kentucky Policy hashtag R1 billion tax webinar. My name is Natalie Cunningham, and I am the Outreach Director at Kentucky Policy, and I am here with your friend,
Alexa. Yeah, I'm with Kentuckians for the Commonwealth and work as the economic justice organizer. Really happy to be here with KY Policy, who has been our friend and ally for much longer than I've been around. So happy to be here.
Same here. I feel like our organizations have definitely been friends longer than we've known each other. But at Kentucky, I just want to say a second who we are. At the Kentucky Center for Economic Policy, we believe that when we understand policy choices and their impacts, we can build a commonwealth where everyone thrives. Kentucky Policy makes these choices clear by producing credible research, breaking down complex issues around public investments, taxes, education, criminal justice, healthcare, jobs, the economy, and more. So that you know how they affect you and why they matter. We're here today to talk about taxes. And so I would love to introduce you all to the executive director and founder of the Kentucky Center for Economic Policy. And that is my boss, Jason Bailey, who is now on the screen. And he's going to take over and tell you all a little bit about what our legislators are trying to do right now. And it's a little frustrating, but we're really thankful for Jason for being here and telling us about it. So.
All right. Well, thanks, Natalie and Alexa. And I want to give a big shout out and thank you to KFTC for co-hosting this webinar with us on such a timely and important topic. And that's what's going on in the legislative session with our tax system, which will have major implications for certainly the next couple of years, but potentially much, much farther in the future. So it's a really important time for us to be talking about this. I'm going to share some slides. And yeah, those are up now. So when we talk about the tax system, we should start with talking about the budget, which is really the best tool that we have as Kentuckians together collectively to create a state that puts the well-being of all of us first. It's the best tool we have as a Commonwealth to create equity, to promote prosperity, to improve the quality of life of every Kentuckian. About half the budget goes to education, including preschool through 12th grade, as well as higher education. And there are major portions that go to health, from mental health to paying for doctors and hospitals and dentists, to public health, which has been so important in this pandemic, to our infrastructure, from bridges to broadband to clean water, to providing aid to people falling on hard times. And when it's stronger and better funded, our budget, we won't have the wide disparities that trouble us in our communities. And we will see a Commonwealth that can better thrive when we fund it. Next slide. But those of you who've been paying attention to what the General Assembly has been doing since 2008, they have been making decisions that have severely weakened this tool, and all Kentuckians have been harmed from it. We've had 20 rounds of budget cuts since 2008. And many of the core functions of government, things that we rely on every day, are 15 to 50% less funded than they were just in 2008. In terms of education, just to give a couple examples, our base funding for our public school students, 26% less than it was just 14 years ago. 26% fewer dollars, 33% fewer dollars for higher education. What does that money mean? Those dollars translate into real harms to our communities when we don't fund these things. We see things like higher college tuition and soaring student loan debt, fewer childcare slots, and a harder availability of getting and affording childcare, limited access to drug treatment, even though we are in a crisis, as we know, with the opioid epidemic. Bigger class sizes for our kids, little affordable housing, waiting lists for services for people with disabilities, a lack of raises for teachers and public employees, a lack of clean water for communities that need it. These things really matter. There's an impact to all these severe cuts. Next slide. But now with this budget and in this legislative session, we have the opportunity actually to begin charting a new path and turn a different direction. Congress passed and President Biden signed the American Rescue Plan Act, which was on top of other aid that passed in the previous year. And that sent people stimulus checks, child tax credit checks, expanded unemployment benefits, other things that have really done a great job in stimulating our economy and promoting state tax growth as well. As a result, we actually have a surplus and we have monies to do the things that we haven't been doing since 2008, really invest. This chart just shows what's been in our rainy day fund. You can see that it's been very little from recent years, but now it's on track to be over 28% of our budget in June. So that's real money that we can do things with. Next slide. However, our lawmakers are saying at this point that they're not going to take advantage of this opportunity with that extra revenue. The House passed a budget that spends $1.1 billion less than what the governor had proposed in his budget. And so, unlike the governor's proposal, it doesn't include things like universal preschool for 4-year-olds that he had put forward. It includes $1 billion less for our public schools, which means no money for textbooks. It means no raises for teachers and school staff. It means less money for higher education and for things like domestic violence shelters, libraries, aid for people with disabilities, and so forth. Those things are not in the budget that the House proposed and that the Senate will likely put forward soon. So they're not taking advantage of this opportunity. So what are they doing? Next slide. Indications are that they plan to spend this surplus instead on tax cuts, and specifically income tax cuts. And there's a big concern that they won't just give a one-time tax cut, but potentially make some changes that are permanent. In doing so, if that's the direction they go in, it would squander the immediate opportunity we have to turn the corner on our budget and reinvest in things that are so important. And if made permanent, tax cuts have the potential to harm our budget and economy and weaken the systems that help Kentuckians become educated, healthy, and safe far into the future. So this is a potentially dangerous situation that could shape the kind of Kentucky we have for many years to come. Next slide, please. Those wanting the legislature to pass income tax cuts are peddling false and fabricated stories about what would result. One claim is that it will grow our economy and will attract jobs and attract people. But we have good evidence from other states that have done exactly the same thing in the last decade, that these kind of tax cuts don't grow the economy. And this graph shows states like Maine, Kansas, Ohio, Wisconsin, and North Carolina. They all cut income taxes like the legislature is talking about doing in the 2010s, and they saw their economy grow slower than the national average in the years thereafter. The most famous cases of Kansas, where Governor Sam Brownback said income tax cuts, we just cut the income tax, it'll be a shot in the heart of the Kansas economy. And 5 years later, the Kansas legislature had to roll those income tax cuts back because the economy had slumped and the budget had been slashed. And Sam Brownback had to resign his seat and take a job with the Trump administration. So these things don't work. They don't grow the economy. And why is that? Well, there are really two reasons. Next slide. The first is that they are very, very expensive to cut income taxes, and it takes money away from the foundational investments that are necessary to build a good quality of life. 40% of our revenue comes from the income tax. So nearly half of all of our state revenue comes from the income tax. You can't cut it even a little bit without doing real damage to the budget. And this slide just gives some examples. We have a 5% income tax right now. If we cut it 1/10 of a point to 4.9%, that costs more than we spend on preschool as a state. If we cut it 1/2 a point down to 4.5%, that costs more than we spend on mental health, public health, and family and community services combined. If the legislature cuts it by a point from 5% to 4%, that's more than we spend on all of our higher education. We have 8 universities and 16 community colleges. It's more than we spend on that. Would be gone if a 1% cut. And if they cut it down to 2.5%, which the stated goal of many lawmakers is to make it 0, if they cut the income tax down to 2.5%, that's more than we spend on the base funding for all of our Kentucky public school students. That's 1,477 Kentucky public schools. It's more money to give that tax cut than it would be to fund all those schools with base funding. So it doesn't work in the first instance because it's very expensive, and it takes money out of our schools, out of our healthcare, out of our infrastructure, and the other investments we need to thrive. The other reason, next slide, the second reason the cuts don't work is because they benefit the wealthy overwhelmingly and take money out of our communities to the benefit of outside moneyed interests. The graph on the left shows if we were to cut our income tax by 1 percentage point, 2/3 of the dollars would flow to people who are in the top 20%. They make more than $100,000 a year. They would get 2/3 of the benefit. And the really big winners would be millionaires. The top 1% of Kentuckians make $1.4 million a year on average. They would get $11,000 from an income tax cut. But if you look at the poorest 20% of Kentuckians who are struggling in minimum wage jobs, making $13,000 a year on average, they get $20. $11,000 for millionaires and $20 for low-income working Kentuckians. So if you give the money to the wealthy in this way, not only is it inequitable, but it will leave the economy. It will end up in just more speculation on Wall Street. But if you take that same money and invest it in our schools, invest it in local health departments, give teachers a raise, give child care workers a raise, it will circulate in our local economy, as this graph shows on the right, creating jobs and improving well-being. Next slide. Corporations will also benefit if we move away from the income tax because the legislature will likely also cut the corporate income tax at the same time. Yet corporate tax revenues have already been eroding in Kentucky for decades due to a growing slew of tax breaks that the General Assembly has passed. So we would be giving them more tax breaks. At the same time, all the headlines tell you corporate profits are at a record high. And corporations are raising prices and making even more money during this pandemic. Big corporations are getting bigger and never have done better. And we're seeing proposals for things like a tax break for private planes in the General Assembly. And we should be concerned about things like that getting into the final tax bill. Okay, last slide. I'll just close by saying that the General Assembly has a choice. We have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to change the trajectory for our schools, for our health, for our infrastructure, for our quality of life in a better direction by using the surplus that's made possible because of federal aid as an on-ramp to greater investments in the things that we know make us thrive. Our General Assembly can choose to do that, or they can choose to take door number 2 with tax cuts, particularly income tax cuts that will squander the opportunity, give money to the wealthy and to corporations. And if any portion of them is made permanent, they will limit our ability in the future to ever make the investments that we need for equity and prosperity. So this is a potentially historic decision by the legislature, and they should make that choice that choice informed by what Kentuckians think about how it will affect them and their community. So I hope you will get involved in letting them know which direction they should choose. I will stop there, and I think I'll hand it back to Natalie, or we can see if there are any questions.
We can see if there are any questions. I haven't seen anything yet. We did have a commenter saying, thank you for the great information. So that is great. Oh, here we go. Oh, look at, you already threw it up there. Yay. Talk about how income tax cuts would eventually increase sales taxes and what effects this would have.
Yeah, great question, Mary. Thank you for bringing that up. So if you cut the income tax, it's 40% of our budget. So we're either going to have to slash all these services that we rely on, and that will probably be some of what happens. But probably they're also going to have to raise the sales tax. The sales tax is a regressive tax. It asks more of people who are low income, middle income, and the working class, who out of necessity spend all their income to make ends meet, right? The budgets are much, much tighter. So when you face the sales tax and you have less income, you pay more. And you look at any state that doesn't have an income tax, they have much, much higher sales taxes. There's a lot of lawmakers who like to compare us to Tennessee. Tennessee is not a low tax state. It's a high tax state if you're poor, if you're a member of the working class or the middle class, because the sales tax is much, much higher. It's only a low tax state if you're wealthy and if you're a millionaire, if you're a high income person. So to make up that lost revenue, either now or sometime in the future, they're going to have to increase the sales tax. So the net effect of that, again, will be a tax cut for the people on the top and a tax increase for everybody else.
Something I keep thinking about is what this actually means to real people. I think you did a really good job of what you said is really powerful to me. And some of the things that stood out was when you said that we've had 20 rounds of tax cut or budget cuts since 2008. And I was thinking about my life since then and before then. And one thing that I've always said and have felt really deeply is that poverty just is like a shadow that kind of follows us around all the time. And I think that comes from, our ancestors and our mamas and papas and what they had to go through in life. And I was thinking about, in 2008, that was when I had, graduated high school. I was going into college, and flunked out of college, but that's a totally different story. But anyway, what it took to get me there was such a big deal. How my life could have been so much different. I wouldn't have had to struggle so much, in my adult life as much as we did in my as a kid, if our budget had money in it to actually fund things that we need. And this is life or death, this is legit life or death, what we're talking about. Things like money for schools so that we have a place not only where, kids in Bonneville can go and learn, and hopefully be able to get out of poverty at some point in their lives, but also a place where they can go and be safe and eat food and have a guidance counselor who can talk to them or be there for them, and access to drug treatment. People who I love would still be here if that was something that was available. And for our legislators to choose to not fund those things means they are not on my side. They're not on my family's side. They're not on my loved one's side. And we absolutely have to let them know what that means to us, for ourselves, for our families, and for our loved ones who have died because of the cause of their screwing around with our money.
Yeah.
Well, and I feel like this question really goes by what you're talking about, Alexa, because you're talking about people and how it affects us as individuals. And this question is asking about the economy like it's some nebulous idea or something that's way out there, when we are our economy. We, the people, are the ones that are affected and out there. So I would love for Jason to take a gander at this question. Does the economy grow faster when lower economic classes have more money, or when richer classes do?
Yeah, it's a great question. You said it exactly right, Natalie. 70% of our economy is when people have money in their pockets to spend, right? 20% is when the government has money to spend. And that's what we're talking about when we talk about the budget. When the government spends money for schools and infrastructure, healthcare, drug treatment, that's about 20%. And only the rest of it is sort of private investment, corporate investment, business investment. So we are the engine of the economy. And there's this false narrative out there, and you hear this term all the time, the job creators, that the job creators are businesses, and we have to make them happy and give them everything they want. And if they get everything they want, then the wealth and the prosperity will trickle down to the rest of us. We've been hearing that story for decades, and it's false. People aren't even, they're not even damp yet, right? They're not even feeling a drop. The incomes at the top are soaring, and those at the bottom and at the middle have been stagnant for decades. So it's a false story. Any business needs customers. If people don't have money in their pockets, the businesses are shutting down. And that's actually, we learned that in a really big way over this pandemic. When, the economy ground to a halt, a lot of people lost their jobs. But poverty would have been much worse. The federal government had stepped in, and the economy would have been in a deep, dark depression, stepped in and gave people money that they spent. They bought things, right? And they were able to keep the economy going. So it's a really a false story that we're told all the time, that the economy is run by corporate managers and business decisions. It's run by me and you and everyday people having money in their pockets to spend.
Thanks, Jason. I'm looking at another question that's a little bit longer. Can you see that question, Jason? We're asking about markets and value. Does the market tell us what our labor capital ownership is worth, i.e. what we deserve, or are politicians deciding who gets what? Does the private realm fill in the education funding gaps left by the government? Is the voucher program a scam? He says he'll stop now, but there's a lot of questions out there about how our government chooses winners and losers, and how I think these are the kind of the direction he's going in, and asking, are private organizations out there actually filling these gaps that under-resourcing has provided and has created over and over again in our government?
Yeah, I mean, and they're certainly not, and they're not able to. Like, we wouldn't have a school system that would serve every child, no matter their need, if we didn't have a public school system. We know what it's like when we don't have Medicaid expansion. How many people don't have health care? We lived that for up until a few years ago, right? So there is no such thing as the free market. The government structures the markets by its policy decisions, and it picks winners and losers. The question is, whose side are they on?
Thank you. Well, we're very close to our 30-minute marker. We do have another question about Tennessee sales tax. It is a little bit in the weeds. So Jason, can you see that question?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just wondering if you can kind of compact it for us if possible, or we'll pass it on to Alexa and move on. But I want to give you a shot at it. It's just a little weedy for all the things.
Yeah, I'm not sure if there was a question in there. They're talking about some of the specific taxes in Tennessee. So I'm not sure if there is a question.
I think since we're talking about Tennessee again, one of my favorite things that I've heard you say before, Jason, is really bringing out the fact that Tennessee has these natural resources that Kentucky doesn't, natural and human built upon, i.e. Gatlinburg and other kinds of places, Memphis, that are really huge tourist places where they're making up a lot of that income tax that they're not getting, that Kentucky would not be able to do. And so I just wanted to bring that up because I know I've heard you say it probably a lot more eloquently than I just did, Jason. It's a really big, important thing about Tennessee, because I do know that our lawmakers love to compare us to Tennessee when we don't have those same resources or those same attractions that would help fill those gaps. So
yeah, and Tennessee is a poor southern state like Kentucky, and not exactly a model for, having grown up there, not exactly a model of what we want to build ourselves around anyway. But the Great Smoky Mountains National Park is the most popular national park in the entire country. It has the most visitors. People go to Nashville for country music and other things, and to Memphis as well. So their tourism economy is much bigger. And so they get some sales tax from people just coming into the state. And we just don't have that. We're not going to have it, right? I mean, so it's even more destructive for us to get rid of our income tax or reduce it and shift to a sales tax, because there's just no way we'd be able to make up the money. Other states that don't have an income tax, they have big natural resources like Texas, oil and gas. Florida has obviously a lot of tourism. We don't have those things anymore as far as coal. So there's just no way we would replace the money.
Well, Alexa, what can we do about it?
God, you're going to leave me with that? No, there's all kinds of things we can do about it, but I want to talk about 3 just in the last couple minutes here before 8:30 Eastern time. The first one is to write your legislators and let them know that we don't want them to give away our future and tax breaks to the wealthy, and instead we want to pay taxes. We want the wealthy to pay their fair share in taxes, and we need that to happen so that our communities and the people in them, most importantly, the people in them, our loved ones, can have what we need in order to not just survive, but also maybe be able to thrive in the future. The letter is super easy to send. KY Policy has created a web page that you can go to, and it should be on the screen. And I think it might have already been on the screen, and it's in the comments. Okay. But all you have to do is fill in your information, which is important so that the letter knows who to send, which representatives and senators to send your letter to. And then it's already written for you. So you just have to click send. It's a really great way to make your voice heard. And it really, really matters that your legislators hear from you in Frankfort. The second thing I want to tell y'all about is a KFTC event. It's Economic Justice Day at the Capitol on March 8th. There's a Mobilize event, a Mobilize link that you'll see in the comments too. And that event is going to be on March 8th. It'll happen for a big chunk of the day, and there'll be lots of different ways to participate depending on how comfortable you are with COVID risks. So there's ways to participate where you're not in contact with anybody at all. And also there's ways to participate where you go inside the building and have a lobby meeting. So that'll be great as well. And then the last thing is not even just specific to this to these issues that we're talking about tonight, But to write an op-ed or a letter to the editor for your local paper or a paper that you like in Kentucky, I really love writing to the paper because it gives you the opportunity to say what you need to say to people within your community who also care, probably, and just haven't heard yet. And it's also fun. And especially with letters to the editor, they're kind of shorter, so you have to be a little quippier, and it's just kind of fun to do that. Doesn't take any time at all. Myself and Natalie are happy to help you with that too. We can share our email addresses in case you need that help. But those are just 3 ways to get involved. And of course, as always, check out KY Policy. They have a Facebook page that they keep up with, also a website, and KFTC as well. There's always a way to have your voice heard, and all of us really care about it a whole lot. So I really appreciate y'all being on here.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank y'all.